nation of fair.
Yoruba kí ló fẹ́ o.
Yoruba nation of fair.
Ọmọ Nàìjíríà.
Yoruba nation of fair.
Ọmọ Nàìjíríà.
Yoruba nation of fair.
Kí tóbi sẹ́yìn o.
Yoruba nation of fair.
Ìtẹ̀pá wa jẹ́ òtítọ́.
Yoruba nation of fair.
Ìyá yìí máa pọ̀ lápọ̀jù.
Yoruba nation of fair.
Ẹyọ wa jẹ́ ẹ̀tún pa wá.
Yoruba nation of
Ebi
fair.
ń pa wá, ìyà ń jẹ wá.
Yoruba nation of
Àwọn
fair.
ìsàbòrò ló ti pa wá tán.
Yoruba nation of
Ẹ̀jẹ̀
fair.
wa ń ṣe wọ́n Nàìjíríà.
Yoruba nation of fair.
Àwa ò ṣe wọ́n Nàìjíríà mọ́ o.
Yoruba nation of fair.
Nísìnyí o, Yorùbá nation la fẹ́. Yorùbá nation la fẹ́. Ẹ pariwo ẹ̀gbọ́n sókè.
Yorùbá nation of
Ẹ̀jẹ̀
fair.
kan dàpọ̀, ẹ̀jẹ̀ kan rí gbọ́.
Yorùbá nation of
Ẹ
fair.
sọ̀rọ̀ sókè nísìnyí o.
Yorùbá nation of
Ọmọ
fair.
pé ìlú máa ń pariwo.
Yorùbá nation of fair.
Ìlú ti gbóhùn sókè.
Yorùbá nation of fair.
Obìnrin ìlú dẹ̀ ń faraya.
Yorùbá nation of fair.
Àwa ò ṣe wọ́n lè faraya.
Yorùbá nation of fair.
Èyí tí àjẹ́ wa ó ti tó.
Yorùbá nation of fair.
Òṣì yìí máa pọ̀ lápọ̀jù.
Yorùbá nation of fair.
Ẹ̀yàn àjẹ́ tún pa wá.
Yorùbá nation of
Ebi
fair.
ń pa wá, ìyà ń jẹ wá.
Yorùbá nation of
Àwọn
fair.
ìsàbòrò ló ti pa wá tán.
Yorùbá nation of fair.
Ọmọ Nàìjíríà.
Yorùbá nation of fair.
Orí títí ló sọ̀rẹ́ndà.
Yorùbá nation of fair.
Ìlànà ọmọ Oòduà ń pariwo. No more ọmọ Nàìjíríà. Yorùbá World Congress ń faraya. Bírèkì tọ́ni sẹ́yìn o. Yorùbá World Voice dẹ̀ ń pariwo. Yorùbá Nation ní ìsinyìí o. Àgbẹ̀kọ̀yà máa ń faraya. Àwa ò ṣe wọ́n Nàìjíríà mọ́ o. OPC bígí là ń fẹ́. Ẹgbẹ́ Yorùbá lápapọ̀. Gbogbo wọn ti gbóhùn sókè. Yorùbá Nation ní ìsinyìí o. Akíntóyè bàbá pariwo. Good night to Nigeria. Yèyé Òṣàtọ́lá pariwo. Bye bye to Nigeria. Bàbá rọ́pọ̀ kí gbogbo. Bàbá kọ́kọ́ ti gbóhùn sókè. Bye bye to Nigeria. Dára tó ṣó ń faraya. Àwa ò ṣe wọ́n Nàìjíríà mọ́ o. AYCTC ń pariwo. Yorùbá Nation ní ìsẹ̀yìn o. Ọláyọmí koikimedia. Àwọn kọ́kọ́ ti gbóhùn sókè. Good night to Nigeria. Bàbá Èkìtì ń polongo. Yorùbá Nation ní ìsinyìí o. Máyégún jẹ́nẹ̀rà ń faraya. No more ọmọ Nàìjíríà. Ọmọọba Adéjọkẹ́. Màmá kọ́kọ́ ti gbóhùn sókè. Yorùbá Nation ní ìsinyìí o. Ààrẹ Fárúkò ń pariwo. Good night to Nigeria. Olúọmọ Sunday Igboho. Akọgun gbogbo Yorùbá o. Ọwọ́ mi lókè fọ́mọdé mọ̀. Bàbá kọ́kọ́ dẹ̀ ń faraya. A ò ṣerú Fúlàní mọ́ o. Èyí tí àjẹ́ wa ó ti tó. Ó tún gẹ́. Àwọn ṣe wọ́n Nàìjíríà 2014 ló dẹ̀ ti tán. Ṣé wọ́n Nàìjíríà ìyàwó Súlàsì ti súra. Ṣé wọ́n Nàìjíríà ọlọ́kùnlọ́dọ̀ mú yẹ̀lẹ́ o. Ṣé wọ́n Nàìjíríà ọba aládé wọn fẹ́ máa pàṣẹ. Ṣé wọ́n Nàìjíríà ológun wọn fẹ́ máa lògbó. Ṣé wọ́n Nàìjíríà ọmọ ilẹ̀ adúláwọ̀ ni. Ṣé wọ́n Nàìjíríà ọmọ ẹ̀kọ́ kọ́kọ́ nẹ̀fà. Ṣé wọ́n Nàìjíríà orí títí ló sọ̀rẹ̀ndà. Yorùbá nation la fẹ́. Nísìnyí o, Yorùbá nation la fẹ́. Yorùbá nation la fẹ́. Ìfúnná ni wọ́n máa pàṣẹ ilẹ̀ Yorùbá wa. Gbogbo ẹ̀yin lọ́ba lọ́ba ilẹ̀ Yorùbá. Ẹ má ṣe wọ́n rọ ìran. Ẹni dé dá sọ̀rọ̀ yìí o. Gbogbo ẹ̀yin olórí adé pátápátá. Ẹ má ṣe wọ́n rọ ìran. Ẹ má rántí ìbò Àkọ́jà o. Oríro Yorùbá onígbàrún. Ilẹ̀ Yorùbá oníbàjẹ́ o. Ẹ ṣàtúnṣe sára ilẹ̀ yìí. Gbogbo ẹ̀yin alágbádá ilẹ̀ Yorùbá. Ẹ má ṣe wọ́n rọ ìran. Alábá wa kọ́ lọ sí ẹ̀mú. Odò bá ń gbé ayé rẹ̀ lọ. Alábá wa kọ́ lọ sí ẹ̀mú. Odò bá ń gbé ayé rẹ̀ lọ. Ikú tí kò ní gbà ẹni, òwe láti pa fún mi. Àwọn ọmọ lọ́nà méjì mọ́. Yorùbá nation la fẹ́. Àwọn ọmọ lọ́nà méjì mọ́. Yorùbá nation la fẹ́. Alábẹ́rẹ́ bá ó pariwo. Yorùbá nation la fẹ́. Alábẹ́rẹ́ bá ó polongo. Yorùbá nation la fẹ́. Yorùbá ní dásùnra. Yorùbá nation la fẹ́. Ọba ìfaraya. Yorùbá nation la fẹ́. Yorùbá ní Nàìjíríà. Yorùbá nation la fẹ́. Owó ti gbóhùn sókè. Yorùbá nation la fẹ́. Haúsá Fúlàní bọ̀rọ̀.
Ṣé wọ́n Nàìjíríà mọ́?
Onílé kọ́ máa lé lọ́dí.
Ṣé wọ́n Nàìjíríà mọ́?
Gbogbo ọmọ àtọ̀ orí wa o.
Ṣé wọ́n Nàìjíríà mọ́?
Yorùbá nation ní Insecurity o. Yorùbá nation la fẹ́. Ẹ bàbá kọ́ nẹ̀fà. Yorùbá nation la fẹ́. Fún ẹ̀fọ́ dé ìbò. Yorùbá nation la fẹ́. Ojúlówó ọmọ Yorùbá o. Yorùbá nation la fẹ́. Ọmọ ìlọ́tẹ̀ ọwọ́ dé ẹ̀gbọ́. Yorùbá nation la fẹ́. Alákìsà máa báṣẹ lọ. Yorùbá nation la fẹ́. Ọmọdé ẹ̀bọ̀ máa ṣe wòrán. Yorùbá nation la fẹ́. Ọ̀rọ̀ ó bẹ̀rẹ̀ ìrẹ́. Yorùbá nation la fẹ́. Àwọn alálẹ̀ àgbẹ̀ ọ̀nìjà o. Yorùbá nation la fẹ́. Ọmọ Yorùbá aṣojú rẹ̀. Yorùbá nation la fẹ́. Lásòkàdù tó bá ń dán. Ọmọdé ẹ̀mọ́ orúkọ rẹ̀ ò ní parun. Ilẹ̀ Yorùbá nígbà tó kàdù tó bá ń dán. Ọmọdé ẹ̀mọ́ orúkọ rẹ̀ ò ní parun. Orí títí ló sọ̀rẹ̀ndà. Yorùbá nation la fẹ́.
Ọmọ Ìbàràpá lápapọ̀ ẹ̀jẹ̀ adúpẹ́ lọ́wọ́ àkí ọmọ Yorùbá lápapọ̀ tìlé tó kó ẹ̀mí àbọ̀ ẹ̀bá nǹkan mọ Adéyẹmọ Chief Sunday Adéyẹmọ Ìgbòho orúkọ ńlá tí ń jámọ̀ láyà bí àrá orúkọ tó ń dẹrù bo lórúkọ gan-an. Ọmọ Yorùbá ẹ má sùn o torí pé bùrà a kò lè fojú kégbodò láyé títa ríro lẹ̀dá ń kọlà wúrà tó máa dán alànà kọjá dandan o. Ọ̀wọ́n irin ní má bẹ̀rẹ̀ wọ̀nà ẹ̀dá kan ò lè ṣì wá lọ́nà mọ́ ẹjẹ́ àfìmọ̀ṣọ̀ kan ká lè débi re ẹjẹ́ àjọ gbárùkù ti Sunday Ìgbòho ṣá ọmọ Ìgbòho mọ̀rẹ́ nílùú Alágbàdo Òde ọmọ atapẹ̀tẹ̀ wọnú omi ọmọ gègèlè wodò sànyà ìsànyà ò rẹ́ràn bàbá yín láàrin ìdí omi kò sì náà ń kán sí yín lẹ́nu ọmọ òkúta mẹ́ta òkè gbòó ìkan ń ṣe yín ní dábọ̀dàbọ̀ ìkan ní mọ́ rọra ìkan tó kù nígbà tí wọ́n ò mọ̀ Gbòho mọ̀ rẹ́ kí ló dé Gbòho mọ̀ rẹ́ sí ọmọ òpópó sanran ìgbàgede Gbòho sùn wọn láláìsí bẹ̀rẹ̀ wọn ní kó ní bẹ̀rẹ̀ ó máa kó bẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ ẹ̀sìn òní bímọ méjì ní Gbòho mọ̀ rẹ́ bẹ́sìn bá bímọ méjì ní Gbòho àfikàn pọ̀pọ̀ sí amúkan yòókù bọ sànyà àtúmúyà rẹ̀ tí ò lọ́rọ̀ gbọ́ àfiṣẹrù wálé wàrà mòjé ọmọ onílé ọlà àwọn àjòjì tó ń ṣe ségesège tọ́láwọn ò ní bomi kó símú wọ́n láwọn ò ní bomi sànyà wẹ́sẹ̀ ìgbà tójú kò fi rí ńkọ́ gbogbo wọn náà sáré bomi kó símú wọ́n sì bomi sànyà wẹ́sẹ̀ ọmọ abẹ́rẹ́ mẹ́ta òde ayé ọ̀kan ṣẹ́ ọ̀kan tẹ̀ ọ̀kan tó kù ní gbogbo ayé tí ránṣọ kiri gbogbo ọmọ Yorùbá Sunday Igboho onírèlẹ̀ láéláé torí àbá lásán nìkan ń dá òkúta ò ṣe gbé fún wọn o ìmọ̀ràn lásán ni ti balùwẹ̀ kò pọ́sibú kó dòdò láyé ń bí ó kún díẹ̀ títọ́ domi láéláé ìtọ́ mi lè domi Sunday Igboho arógun má ti dí tó ń jà fẹ́tọ̀ Yorùbá ní tilé tó kó.
Again. No going back. Igboho òòṣà iṣẹ́ rẹ̀ ń tẹ̀síwájú. Mr. Koiki ẹ ṣé o, àwọn ọmọ mi ló ń kí yín o. Àwọn ọmọ mi ló ń kí yín o. Lágbára Ọlọ́run, a máa délẹ̀ lérí o lórúkọ Jésù. Yorùbá nation.
And a very good afternoon and welcome to the live transmission. It is a beautiful Saturday. The weather is beautiful outside. It is just coming up to 2:49 p.m. local time in London, May 20th, 2023. I welcome you as you are settling into the conversation. It's going to be more of English presentation because I am speaking to the international community. Most especially as a lot of us that are following the G7, summit or conference that is currently going on in Japan. So this broadcast will be in English for the benefit of those that are also in that part of the globe. I welcome you once again. My name is OLAMILEKAN, one of the media fighting the right cause and asking the international community regarding a country in West Africa called Nigeria. Nigeria, as we all know, the history has been running for the last 108 years. But those history is now some kind of a question by the indigenous people, those that are asking for the right to what we call self-determination. As we know, self-determination is not a crime under the declaration of the colony of the people, which was something that occurred in 1960, where those that are asking for their right, and that right is something that must be respected. 1960 was Nigeria independent, but a lot of activities happened before the independence. But today, as the world is revolving, as the world is changing, so many questions continue to surround the entity of what we call Nigeria. And that is why we are again using this medium. As the G7 continue around the world, we would also like to let them understand that those that are asking for this right must be respected. Whether they are happy with it, whether they disagree with it, it does not make any difference. We have America, the United States of America, President Bill Clinton, that is currently as well in Japan for these very important summit. We have our Prime Minister Rishi Sunak that have also traveled all the way for these magnificent, important summit. We also have the Macron that have also traveled, the French president that has also made it all the way down to Hiroshima 2023 G7. We also have in there Trudeau, the Canada Prime Minister, that is also representing his country, Canada. We also have as many other European countries. We have German Prime Minister that has also traveled all the way to Japan in Hiroshima. We also have what we can call so many other countries that have been invited. The host is Japan. And Japan, as we know, is one of the most powerful countries, just like all these G7 countries as well. I will be giving us a breakdown of what the G7 means for those of us that probably don't have an idea. What does it mean, G7? How do we, as those that are asking for our right to self-determination, come into a constructive dialogue with these G7 as we know them? Once again, this is Koikimedia Live. This is the day 2 of the ongoing G7, where we have Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, United Kingdom, United States, and as well the European Union. As the G7 continue, we are again saying, trying to run away from the reality of what is going on in Nigeria can also lead to a lot of catastrophe. Just as we know that things can spiral quickly if we do not manage the current state of situation in that country called Nigeria. The G7, as they are being hosted in Japan, we are also asking them to remember that the war that might occur in Nigeria, if care is not taken, might be different from what happened during the 1945 war in that same country called Japan, when we knew how a lot of situation during the Second World War. The surrender of the Empire of Japan in the World War II was actually announced by the Emperor Hirohito on 15th of August, but was formally signed on the 2nd of September 1945, bringing the war hostility to a close. By the end of July 1945, the Imperial Japanese Navy had become incapable of conducting major operations, and the Allied invasion of Japan was imminent. Together with the United Kingdom and China, the United States called for the unconditional surrender of the Japanese armed force in the Potsdam Declaration on the 26th of July 1945. Today, what we are witnessing in Nigeria is what we can call the marginalization, the subjugation, and the right of those that decide that calling a referendum now should not be ruled out of the table by the federal government of Nigeria to determine whether some of us still want to continue with this entity called Nigeria that was put together by the British government in 1914. And as we know, if we do not do anything now, what we saw during the World War II, or what we can call the Civil War that led to 5 million people being killed by the federal government of Nigeria and their ally in 1967 for 3 years. What we could witness in Nigeria could last more than 3 years, and there will be a lot of catastrophe. This is why, as the G7 Day 2 continue today, the 20th of May 2023, we are also using the opportunity of the summit that also have a theme surrounding the security. Because as we speak right now, we, the indigenous people from the Yoruba and those from the other part of Nigeria, are not secure because the government of Nigeria have decided not to care about our lives. So my life as a Yoruba man is no longer safe. So as the global community are talking about this beautiful summit that is currently going on as we speak right now, it's called the Day 2. And for those of you that are watching the broadcast, you can tell that they are actually discussing economic security. And when we talk about economic security, in the southwest part of Nigeria, we do not have what it calls economic security anymore. All part of the Yoruba land, coming all the way from Kwara State, all the way to Kogi State, coming down to Ondo State, Ekiti State, Osun State, and then going into Oyo State, down to Ogun State, down to Lagos State. We have now witnessed that for the last almost 2 decades, the Yoruba people can no longer secure themselves because we have been marginalized by what we call the Fulani government. They've literally opened the border that America, Japan, Canada, Germany, and the European countries, all the way to UK, making sure their own borders continue to be secure. But what we witness in the government of President Muhammadu Buhari have literally left open for a very long time of 8 years the influx of the jihadists penetrating into Nigeria and creating havoc on a daily basis in thousands of people. And the statistics of this government in the last 8 years is indicating that more than 100,000 innocent people have been killed. More than 100,000 innocent Nigerians have been killed. So if the world G7 is talking about economic security, Nigeria is going to create a lot of havoc in the future for the same economic security that they are trying to fight for. We know that the jihadis are funded both from inside Nigeria and outside, because evidence indicated that in United Arab Emirates, there were some jihadis that were funding those back home. Up to today, the Nigerian government refused to tell us the names of those perpetrators of the link that the United Arab Emirates were able to find out quickly, and people were sentenced. Today, as we know, which I am now going to back my reference to so many, because as the world is talking about economic security, they must also look into Nigeria, because even the American diplomats were killed in Anambra State by the jihadists, the same people that are being protected by the Fulani government, and likewise the Sultan of Sokoto that refused to speak out. So we are using today, under the G7 Day 2, discussing the economic security, to look into what is going on in Nigeria before it becomes a full-blown civil war. There is still a lot of room for dialogue, whether the Igbos, whether the Yorubas, the Ijos, the Edos, the Hausas would like to all live together. It has been done before. America has given that backing to countries around the world, and they've conducted a peaceful referendum to the exit of those countries. Why is Nigeria different is the question. Are we going to wait until the jihadis kill more American citizens on the soil of Nigeria? Are we going to wait until the jihadis kill more people from French as a French citizen in Nigeria? Are the Japanese going to close their eyes and be talking about economic security when in Nigeria there could be a target by the Fulani jihadis in Nigeria? Is Germany going to keep their eyes away and allow Nigeria to go into where we are overrun by the jihadis because the government is no longer capable of dealing with the problem? Is the European country going to shy away and not speak out now until more innocent European citizens are killed in Nigeria, just as 4 people were killed that worked with the U.S. consulate in Nigeria? I'm asking again, the G7, are you going to close your eyes and allow Nigeria to become the next ISIS breeding ground? Italy, you have as many of your diplomats and citizens that are operating in Nigeria. Are you going to allow the ISIS, the Boko Haram, the jihadis to continue to chop their head and then nobody said anything? The question is, even as we speak right now today, the United Kingdom have issued warning to any UK citizen traveling to Nigeria to avoid traveling to Anambra State. The question then is, who is the next target by these breeder of Boko Haram and the terrorists operating in Nigeria? My name is OLAMILEKAN. I am speaking directly to the world leader to not shy away from the reality of terrorism in Nigeria. The terrorism continues to grow because we do know that Nigerian government under the Fulani of President Muhammadu Buhari have decided to shy away from the reality. I am now saying, according to Reuters, today, once again, a very good afternoon and welcome to the program. This program is going to be all the way through in English for the benefit of the world leader to listen to those that are calling for the right to self-determination without a bloodshed. We are speaking directly to those in Japan. From all the countries, Ukraine is being protected for a reason. The Yorubas must be protected. The Biafra must be protected. The Edo must be protected. The Hausa must be protected by the Fulani jihadis that wants to convert every one of us into Islam in their own ideology that we disagree with. As we speak today, the northern part of Nigeria is already operating an Islamic country because they are already operating on Sharia law. The world in G7 today, as you're discussing this economic summit, you must remember that the relationship you have with Nigeria will be destroyed by the same terrorists that is already breeding, and they're becoming more powerful. They have overrun as many military barracks, and we know that all this is happening because there is a backing coming from the northern part of Nigeria, from the Sultan of Sokoto, and some of their governors that have allowed the Yoruba part of the Nigeria today, where our economy have been destroyed. No more going to the farm because of the Boko Haram and the terrorism that is happening. This is a live transmission, 5 minutes past 3 p.m. is a Saturday afternoon, as we are speaking directly to the G7 on what we call the day 2 of what they are discussing, which is very, very important to the global world, to the trade. But the trade between Nigeria will not happen when terrorism is breeding, and is breeding at a very, very fast pace. More than 100,000 innocent live children, women have been massacred by the full-blown terrorism that is happening in Nigeria, and the government is already compromised. Let's listen to a former chief of defense staff, T.Y. Danjuma, told us 5 years ago.
Every one of us must rise up. The armed forces are not neutral. They collude They collude. They collude with the armed bandits. They kill people, kill Nigerians. They facilitate their movements. They cover them. If you are depending on the armed forces to stop the killings, you will all die one by one.
Again, I am telling the international community, discussing economic security when Nigeria is already a breeding ground for the next ISIS, Islamic State of whatever they call themselves. There are more than 10 different terrorists operating in Nigeria. And the intelligence continue to tell us in the last 10 years that the government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria have shied away from telling you the lies, where the current Minister for Information, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, travels to abroad, travels to the West, and tell you that nothing is happening. But you saw what actually took place in Anambra State last week, Tuesday, precisely on the 13th, just at about almost 1,500 hours, when there was an attack on the consulate vehicle and 4 lives were lost. Is America, Joe Biden, are you going to continue to shy away and allow more innocent people to be massacred after 100,000 have been killed in the 8 years of President Muhammadu Buhari's government? Are you going to look away? The Japanese Prime Minister, the French, the Germany, the European Union, the Italian, the UK. Let's also remind you that it is not the first time that we've been talking. To back up what I've just been saying, this is in our Yoruba language. This woman was attacked at home in Ondo State, the southwest part of Nigeria. This is what she had to say.
Mo bá gbogbo aṣọ mi wá kú pátá àti tàti sí mi ní mo wá wo ibẹ̀ tó ń bá gbé tó adábí kan bí tó náà ọkùnrin mi wá dé láti gbọ́ ó ní kó ń ṣílẹ̀kùn fóun so ọmọ dáàdì mi Adétutù Òkèbàlóyè ó wà lọ́wọ́ mi mo wá ní kí yẹn lọ ṣí ilẹ̀kùn bí yẹn ṣe ṣílẹ̀kùn ọkọ mi wá pọnú kí ṣe oníṣègùn tó ń jẹ ní mi ìdáná kò sówó kankan lọ́wọ́ mi tí màá fi ìdáná bọ́kọ mi ṣe bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí ní pariwo oúnjẹ kò wá tilẹ̀kùn tó èmi wá jáde síta sẹ́ẹ̀tì mi tí mo gbé sórí tébù ní pálọ̀ mi mo wá lọ mú sẹ́ẹ̀tì yẹn bí mo kàn ṣe mú sẹ́ẹ̀tì yẹn mo kàn rí àwọn pípù yẹn àwọn méje ń wọlé ó dàbẹ́ ni pé àwọn mẹ́rin gbé ìbọn dání àwọn mẹ́ta oníbọn wọn ní àdá wọ́n wá sọ pé wọ́n bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí Hausa sọ̀rọ̀ wọ́n ní Súbàhà Fúlàní bá wọ́n ní sú kìnnápà ni wọ́n láwọn kì í ṣe Fúlàní pé kìnnápà làwọn wọ́n ní kí n gbé owó wá mo wá fi Hausa dáhùn pé báǹdè kùdí wọ́n ní àpò kùdí wọ́n á ní báǹdè kùdí wọ́n ní kí n gbó wá mo ní mi ìlú tó bí kan ṣe gbá ìbọn mọ́ mi láyà ìkan tẹ̀lé ọkọ̀ mo pé ọkọ̀ mi ó lọ.
So what do they expect of us now? Now that this war is on our doorstep. Of course, there has got to be civil mobilization. And if we keep waiting for this to be centrally handled, we're all going to...
The audio will come back. I've seen the problem there. I'll deal with that.
That for me is personally intolerable. It's not an acceptable condition. And whatever it takes, I stand ready to contribute in any way.
Sorry, yeah, the reason for the attack is because our mothers are no longer safe. So let me rewind what I said earlier that was missing in that almost 2 seconds or 2 minutes, in the broadcast. That audio was not coming out. Let me repeat it again. The video we watched earlier of our mother, where she was attacked. I'm talking about this particular video. This video happened in the southwest part of Nigeria, known in Ondo State. She was invaded in her home. I am now asking all the G7 countries. I started with America. I said, as America, would you allow a terrorist to invade an American citizen in their private residence? I went on to tell Japan Prime Minister, would you allow a citizen to be invaded by what we call a terrorist? I went to say the same to Canada and France, Germany, Italy, United Kingdom, and the European Union. Are you going to sit back and allow all your citizens where terrorists can invade them and then kill them, kidnap them for ransom? Is this something that you would allow in the West? Why then are we not looking into the current state of situation in Nigeria, where more than 100,000 innocent Nigerians have been killed? This is what you missed out in the last 2 minutes of that sound where engineers were trying to rectify the problem. I am now saying again that as we, the Yorubas, under the leadership of Professor Adebanji Akintoye, is now saying to the South part, to the G7, as you continue your deliberation today, we wish you a successful deliberation. But the question is, are you sure you can discuss economic security when the economic security in Nigeria has been invaded, where the economic security of Nigeria is no longer visible for not just Nigerians, but for as many other diplomats and their citizens that are living in Nigeria? Because we know that each of you, the G7 nation, have your citizens living in Nigeria. As we said earlier on, we saw what happened in Anambra State. This was again another point to show that terrorism in Nigeria is not being dealt with. It is actually being left open to kill the economic security of the Southwest, kill the economic security in the Middle Belt, kill the economic security in the Southeast, and then kill the economic security in the northern part of Nigeria. And no one is no longer safe because all those politicians are all compromised. And we will also prove that again. But before we go into the conversation again, today we are looking at the G7 Day 2 as they continue to engage, as they continue to discuss issues affecting people like the Ukrainians. They must also start talking about those indigenous Yorubas that are also being affected in the southwest, in the west part of Africa known as Nigeria. Why are we different? Why should one part of the world be well taken care of and the remaining part is now being used as what we call statistics? Once again, my name is OLAMILEKAN. I'm one of the media representing the Yoruba Nation movement. And as we continue to say, we would sit on a dialogue with America, with Japan, with Russia, with Ukraine, with any countries around the world. But neglecting what is happening to the indigenous people could lead to what we are witnessing in Sudan and what has happened in the past, where there was what we call the civil war in 1967 that led to 5 million people. And we know that is not what Joe Biden stands for. Joe Biden have spoken during the United Nations General Secretary Assembly, last year, and this is what you have to say. Why then are you shying away from what is happening to the real indigenous people in Nigeria and those from the Southwest as well?
Perhaps singular among this body's achievements stands the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is the standard by which our forebears challenged us to measure ourselves. They made clear in 1948, human rights are the basis for all that we seek to achieve. And yet today in 2022, fundamental freedoms are at risk in every part of our world, from the violations in Xinjiang, detailed recent reports by the Office of UN High Commissioner, to the horrible abuses against pro-democracy activists and ethnic minorities by the military regime in Burma, to the increased repression of women and girls by the Taliban in Afghanistan. And today, we stand with the brave citizens and the brave women of Iran who right now are demonstrating to secure their basic rights. But here's what I know. The future will be won by those countries that unleash the full potential of their populations, where women and girls can exercise equal rights, including basic reproductive rights, and contribute fully to building a stronger economies and more resilient societies, where religious and ethnic minorities can live their lives without harassment and contribute to the fabric of their communities, where the LGBTQ plus individuals live and love freely without being targeted with violence, where citizens can question and criticize their leaders without fear of reprisal. The United States will always promote human rights and the values enshrined in the UN Charter in our own country and around the world.
I am now asking the United States President, Joe Biden, as you continue this dialogue in Japan on the day 2, that we are already being marginalized in what is called Nigeria as indigenous people. I am using the word of what you said, that we should not sit behind and allow evil to continue to trample on the indigenous people. Our right has already been taken away from us. As we continue to live, we live in fear. We live in a society in Nigeria as the Yoruba people, where our life has no longer mean anything to the government of the day. And we are saying again, it is time that we have a constructive dialogue with Americans so that we can decide whether we still want to participate in Nigeria, or rather wait until what was said by your former colleague, a former president. This is what he had to say, rather than wait till when the crisis will explode, where there will be civil war, where humanity, where catastrophe, where there will be destruction. We are saying that there is still time for as much of constructive dialogue between the indigenous people and Nigerian government and the international community. If otherwise, this is what Bill Clinton said.
But our historic memory includes the notion that your greatest days were under Ivan, Peter the Great, and Catherine the Great. In other words, when you could control your neighbors. And people don't want to be controlled anymore. They want to be free to chart their own course. I'll never forget the first time a man with impeccable military credentials, the warden of Rhodes House, who was Admiral Viscount Montgomery's aide de camp in World War II, said, you know, you're going to have to leave Vietnam. For the same reason we had to leave Nigeria. We left Nigeria, there was a horrible war, 3 million people died, but we had to go, and you're going to have to go. And I said, why? He said, because they don't want you. You know, people want to chart their own course.
That is what Bill Clinton said. It was very clear. Japan is holding the summit of the G7. But in 1945, we saw the atrocity, we saw the World War II, we saw the damage, the human catastrophe. But today, as the world is sitting on that beautiful round table, why Bill Clinton was telling us some few months back that the same way you left Nigeria during the Civil War of 1967, if there is no constructive dialogue between the indigenous people, we might end up seeing the same scenarios that is playing out right now in Sudan. It has been played before in other countries around the world. But in 2023, just as the right of the American is important, the right of the Yoruba people must be decided whether we want to live in Nigeria as Nigerians or as Yoruba people. And that decision is in our own hands, not in the hands of the West, not in the hands of the federal government, but we would prefer to have a kind of a constructive dialogue, a conversation where we can all decide, just as the Ukrainians are making the decision whether they want to be part of Russia or not, how the other part of the globe, the last countries from Montenegro that decided whether they want to be part of the Serbia, that decided to make their declaration on the July 2006, from likewise the South Sudan, which is the newest country. We are saying to those that are sitting in the round table of the G7 that the lives of the Yoruba people is as important as the lives of the American citizen. The life of the Yoruba people is as important as the life of the German people. The lives of the Yoruba people is as important as the life of the Japanese people. The lives of the Yoruba people is as important as the lives of these people from the French people, the French citizen. The lives of the Yoruba people is as the same as important as the life of the Italian people. The lives of the Yoruba people is as important as the lives of the UK citizen. The lives of the Yoruba people is as important as the lives of those from the European Union. Our life is not to be taken as a peanut. The lives of the Yoruba people must now be looked into, so that we do not take the law into our own hands. This is why we are coming out again, using today as another earmark to discuss and ask, why is my life different from those of this nation of the G7? Why is the life of a G7 citizen more important than the lives of the indigenous people in what was created under the evil disguise of calling us Nigeria, knowing fully well that there's nothing called Nigeria. As at 1913, there was nothing called Nigeria. The whole idea of Nigeria was put together by the British monarch in 1914 that ended up to what we call Nigeria independent in 1960. But today, as we know that the Nigerian law has not had the opportunity to give us the clause to a referendum, we are now using this powerful message to the G7 to look into the indigenous people so that we can have the way out without a bloodshed, so that we can all decide, just as the other countries around the world, just as those that have had from the East Timorians that had a referendum. The South Sudan was given a referendum to believe whether they would live together or there will be an exit. We do not want as many more lives to die, and this is why we are saying that there is still room for conversation. But if we do not look into such, then we are giving room for other options. And those options might have what we call a kind of catastrophe to humanity. Our life is as important as any other G7 nation, and we will decide whether we want to be part of Nigeria or not. Nobody will be forced, just as an American will not be forced to decide whether he wants to change their sexuality or not. The lives of those that decide to change their sexuality is not even being, trampled on. Why then must our life be held into a Nigeria when Nigeria is not working for us as indigenous people? And this is why we are saying, as the G7 continue this economic security summit, we say we must also be respected. We must be given our right. As there's a lot going on in the G7, let us say again that as you are all uniting against Russia, we hope you would also unite against the federal government of Nigeria that continue to disobey its laws. We hope that you will do whatever it takes as you continue to look for solutions so that the lives of the Ukrainian can be decided. We hope that you would also look into the lives of the indigenous people with over 250 different ethnic groups living together in what is known as Nigeria in the southwest part of Africa today. Once again, my name is OLAMILEKAN. The Boko Haram continue to operate without any cross-check. And again, this is just an evidence to such. So what you're watching for those nation representing the G7, I am sure you would not want, these kind of activities happening in America in broad daylight. I am sure those of you in Canada would not want this kind of situation where terrorists are operating without impunity in Canada. I am sure, Japan would not appreciate if terrorists are wielding AK-49 and RPG in Japanese city. I am sure the European Union, I am sure the Italian, likewise the United Kingdom and the German as well. The question then is, why are we different? Why should our own case be different from the current state of things? We also can say, this is what we were told by the late Malapia regarding the insecurity in Nigeria being sponsored by a current governor in the northeast part of Nigeria today. Northern part of Nigeria, rather.
Which is it for you, Dr. Obadiah? Do you think the government is unwilling or unable to protect the people of Southern Kaduna?
In fact, it is not only unable, it is unwilling, and we have good reason to feel that they are part and parcel of the killers. Let me make some revelations to you.
That's a very big allegation, Dr. Obadiah. The government is part and parcel of the killers.
Yes.
That's big.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, how would the government just say, oh, it is revenge killing and so on? Then you leave it there. Oh, because it is revenge killing and so on and so forth. The body language of this administration, the body language of the state government shows clearly that they have a hand in the killings. No doubt about it. Because, you see, General Abacha, and people don't give him his due. Do you think you would have tolerated such nonsense? And let me make some revelations, because some of us also have our own intelligence networks.
Okay.
Have met with some of the bandits. We have met with some of their high commanders. One or two who have repented. They have sat down with us, not once, not twice. They told us that one of the northern governors is the commander of Boko Haram in Nigeria. Boko Haram and the bandits are one and the same thing. They have a sophisticated network. During this lockdown, their planes were moving up and down as though there was no lockdown. Moving ammunitions, moving logistics, moving money, and distributing them in different parts of the country. They're already in the south, in the rainforest of the south. They're everywhere. They told us that when they finish these rural killings, they will move to phase 2. The phase 2 is they will go into the urban cities, going from house to house, killing prominent people. I can tell you, this is the game plan. By 2022, they want to start a civil war in Nigeria.
You heard them quite right without mixing words. That was the former Deputy Central Bank of Nigeria, was killed last year thereabout in Nigeria after a lot of revelation regarding the insecurity. As we know that the world is still gathering at the Japan, where the ongoing security summit is going on, what are the themes that discussion is going on today? The G7 leaders' statement on economic resiliencies and economic security, fostering mutual beneficial partnerships, supporting resilient and sustainable value chains remain our priority to reduce risk both for our economy as well as globally and ensure sustainable development for all. Recent events have highlighted vulnerabilities in economics around the world to natural disaster, pandemic, geopolitical tensions, and cohesion. Cohesion is very, very key. It is one of those that is still having a big impact as the indigenous people. Coercion, the practice of pursuing someone to do something by using force or threat. The Islamic jihadis are telling us we must abide by their own ways of life. I am sure the international community under the G7 would not want the same for their own citizens. Recalling our commitment from the 2022 G7 Elumos Summit, we are taking additional steps today to enhance our ongoing strategic coordination on economic resiliency, economic security by reducing vulnerabilities and countering malign practice that exploit and reinforce them. These complement the corresponding steps we are taking to enhance supply chain resilience as the lead out in the G7 Clean Energy Economy Action Plan. We underline the importance of cooperating both within the G7 as well as with all our partners to enhance global economic resilience, including by supporting a more significant role for low and middle income countries in supply chains in a way that also promotes their diversification, local value creation, benefit local workers and communities as well. We will address non-market policies and practice designed to reinforce dependencies, and we will counter economic coercion. We will continue to ensure that clearly define the narrow set of sensitivity technologies that are crucial for national security or could threaten international peace and security are appropriately controlled without undue impacting broader trade in technology. We affirm that our cooperation to strengthening economy. So what we are saying is, if you talk about all these, Nigeria is still open to what we call the Fulani Boko Haram, ISIS, that would not allow economy to prosper in Nigeria, and that is having a big impact on the lives of indigenous people that are called Nigerians today. As we move away from that now, we go straight into the next section of the program before we have about just an hour, and then we're going to bring the program to an end. The British monarchs' ties to slavery are writ large in what we call historical archive. This is an article that came out about a month ago, and as we look into that today, the question is, the slavery that occurred during the 200 years of the British Empire was used to marginalize and suppress the real indigenous people and the real owner of the resources. Writ is a form of written command in the name of a court or other legal authority to act or abstain from acting in a particular way. So when we come back again to the article, it says the British monarch ties to slavery. They have a huge role during the slave trade, and we go into it again. As a historian, I see how the voices of enslaved people have been excluded from history. Now we must listen and respond to their descendants. We must listen and respond to their descendants. So we hope as the G7 summit continue, as they continue to engage and deliberate around the global threat in the world, the economy, the security, they must also remember that without the indigenous people that were enslaved for a very long time, we would all continue to live in danger. On March 27, 2007, it marks what we can call the 450 years after Elizabeth I sponsored the John Hawkins slave expedition to West Africa. 2007 made it exactly 450 years of what we call the expedition. Who was John Hawkins? As we know a little bit of him. John Hawkins, admiral and a privateer, slave trade. Sir John Hawkins was born in 1532, died in 1595. He was one of the most notable sailors and the Navy commanders of the 16th century. He is known for his pivotal role in the maritime history of England and the rise of the global slave trade. Let's watch a little bit of this video. I do not own the copyright. It's just for education purpose, and the title is under Britain, Transatlantic Slave Trade, and this is owned by the Royal Museum here in Greenwich, London.
The portrait shows Sir John Hawkins. Here is a statesman, essentially. This is him as an official of the court. He is, of course, also a businessman. His family is involved in the trade to Africa. And in 1564, he actually seized Africans and became the first English slave trader. In the Tudor period, sugar was extremely expensive. The Caribbean was ideal for sugarcane production. Britain, of course, very rapidly developed an extremely sweet tooth, and sugar production had to increase to meet this enormous demand. But this is back-breaking work, and Africans were forcibly transported, and in many cases simply worked to death on the sugar plantations. He tried to interest Queen Elizabeth in the slave trade, and she was initially appalled by the idea, wondering what would become of the Africans and what would become of their souls. When Sir John explained the profits that could be made from it, her morals went to one side, and she did lend a lordship for his future activities. There are a lot of themes in the gallery, but one of the key themes simply is that enormous transportation of human life forcibly across the Atlantic, the extraordinary cruelty and misery that was involved in that. And I think to have people reflect on that today and think about potential modern parallels would be a useful outcome from a visit to the Atlantic Gallery.
And that is John Hawkins, that was involved in a lot of slaves of our forefathers from what is known in Nigeria today. John Hawkins' early life, as we know from these reports, today being the 20th day of May 2022, this is Koikimedia Live, bringing the world closer to your doorstep so that you can have a background understanding of the slave trade that the British government, the British monarch, was fully involved. John Hawkins was born into a wealthy maritime family in Plymouth. His father, William Hawkins, had visited the New World in 1527, traded in Guinea and Brazil. He was also a prominent figure in the court of Henry V. By his mid-20s, Hawkins was already making voyages. In his mid-20s, while those at home continue to ask us what is the way forward, somebody in his mid-20s was already traveling into our territory and preparing to enslave us and move as many of our forefathers. He was only 20 years old. Hawkins was already making voyages to many major ports such as the Canary Islands. While mainly trading in textiles and sugar, there are accounts involving in Hawkins and piracy. The sea dogs, the pirate or the privateers. In the 15th century, there was a thin line between the piracy and the privateering. A privateer was an individual licensed to attack and raid shipping belonging to an enemy government. Usually, during a war, these private contractors would then pay a cut of their bounty back to the government. In this case, Sir John Hawkins, Sir Francis Drake, Sir Martin Frobisher, Sir Walter Raleigh, known collectively as the Sea Dogs. So you got the understanding that these were people being used during the 15th century to create a lot of havoc, were a group that were commissioned by the Queen. Imagine the Queen commissioned them to attack and loot the Spanish fleet. Remember, these were all happening in the shore of within that part of what is known as Nigeria today. While England was not at war with Spain, Queen Elizabeth I gave the Sea Dogs legitimacy in England to plunder the Spanish ships to maintain a maritime dominance over trade passage. That is why today, those that continue to call for Nigeria do not understand that you are actually calling for Nigeria while the trade remain out of Nigeria, while you remain poor forever. Similar privateering activities were carried out by the Spanish fleet with the guard coasters and many of the Barbary coasters. However, the relative size and the speed of the English fleet aided the English in substantially reducing the power of the Spanish Navy. These actions were a determining factor in King Philip II's attempted invasion of England with the Spanish Armada. John Hawkins and the slave trade. While several other Englishmen had already taken slaves from Africa, remember, why other Englishmen? They didn't say Yoruba men. It was not Hausa men. They were not Igbo men. Englishmen had already started taking slaves in what we call Africa by the mid-15th century. John Hawkins effectively set what they call the pattern that became known as the English slave trade triangle. He set up what we call today the English slave trade triangle. And what does that mean? What do we understand by that? When you hear the word the English slave triangle, maybe we should get a better understanding to that. The triangular trade, the most historical significant triangular trade was the transatlantic slave trade, which operated between Europe, Africa, and America from the 16th century. So for 16th century, they were moving us as sheep, they were moving us as people without dignity. And today, as we continue to encourage our people to understand who we are so that we can go back and save more lives and become who we are in the global community. They want to remain that slave forever. Both the diaspora elite, both those diaspora that are not even understanding that the Yoruba nation that we are calling for today is to rectify the triangular trade that was put together by one person known as John Hawkins. He created that pattern of how many people were moved from the export commodity and export in what we call international trade is a good produce in one country that is sold into another country. But these were people selling human beings. But today, we are now coming into their country where we have become the 5th or the 10th generation slaves. Let's go back quickly, since we understood now what the triangular, and when you look at this again, the British North America comprises the colonial territories of the British Empire in the Northern America from 1783 onward. The English colonization of the North America began in 16th century in Newfoundland, then further south at the Roanoke and Jamestown. But what we are explaining to those of you that are listening to this is that during that period of the slave trade, John Hawkins created the triangular trade. The Atlantic slave trade was used, a system of a three-way transatlantic exchange known as historically as the triangular trade, which operated between Europe, Africa, and America. But today, every part of Europeans are stopping us from getting into their country, and as much as also UK left Europe after 35 years, America is stopping you from getting into their countries. Why then do we want to remain in those countries called Nigeria when we can set up a new diplomatic tie, a new relationship with this country, and decide if we want to go there, we must be respected with our own Yoruba passport, just as an American would not even be bothered coming into Nigeria because their passport makes them to travel around the world, as the Japanese as well. These are the reasons why we are calling for the Yoruba nation. It's not just because the Fulani is killing us in the forest. It is because of the transatlantic slave trade that took place in the 16th to the 19th century. A classic example is the colonial Molossa trade. What do we understand by the colonial Molossa trade? The colonial Molossa trade occurred throughout the 17th, 18th century. These were all happening during the 17th, 18th, and 19th century. Nigeria was only Nigeria in the 19th century. That literally means that the Yoruba kingdom has been existing before the 18th century, before the 17th century. The European colonials in America, Molassa was a major trading product in America being produced by enslaved Africans. They were using us as sugar plantation on the European order. Let's go back to John Hawkins. Some of you never know the damage that has been done on our lives, but as you continue to wish that Nigeria continue, the world is laughing at you as a slave that continue in whatever way or shape, whether you get to Europe or you get to any part of the world. Earlier in his career, he led an expedition in which he violently, when I use the word violently all the time on this platform, some of you are always criticizing koikimedia. But during the time that John Hawkins, this is his face, in case you don't know who the person is, he was using violence. He never used peace. He actually used violence to capture 300 Africans in what is known as Sierra Leone, and then transported them without any authority, without any reason, but for one reason, to their own selfish interest. So when I sit here and I tell you that going out of Nigeria is either through dialogue or violence, I want to let you know that John Hawkins started violence. I did not start the violence. They were using violence. And what do we know by the word violently? When we use that on dictionary today, let's see the meaning.
Violently.
Once again.
Violently.
One more time.
Violently.
It is called using physical force. Using physical force intended to hurt the Africans, to remove them from their own territory as slaves, damage, and sometimes kill someone or something. So when I say to those of you that listen to me all the time, we will take Yoruba nation, but we will be preparing our mind for whatever is going to come. It does not matter if it's going to be violent, which we do not pray for, but let's remind ourselves that John Hopkins was using violence to capture 300 Africans. Those were human beings, those were people that doesn't want to be taken out of their territory, but John Hopkins used violence on them. So when some of you don't understand what has been done on the psyche of some of us, while we sit here back to back, I want you to understand that there was a guy called John Hopkins, where he was endorsed by the Queen Elizabeth I of the time to capture slaves in Africa. Early in this year, early in his career, he was using what we call career. When we say career, some of you are driving Okada, that is your career. But somebody was using his own career to violently take away Africans, especially in the southwest of what is called Nigeria. Sierra Leone, as we know, when we go back to history, is under the Oyo Empire. The Oyo Empire was literally destroyed so that they can capture as many slaves and take them into sugar plantation. So continue to love your country called Nigeria. I pray Nigeria does not happen to you. I will be here as I continue to remind you that Nigeria is literally at the verge of breakup. This is Koikimedia. Continue to support us. We need your support, especially this week. Like I said, your support is needed for my own personal needs. That's all I can say for now. If you think you can support us, let us know. It is very, very important. It is urgent, as I say, and I'll be telling you more about that as well. But it is voluntary. You are not going to give us and then ask us what we've done with it. It is voluntary, and I'm talking to those like-minded people. I am personally saying that we need your support on Koikimedia because this week is very, very important. And like I said, if I don't need it anymore, I will let you know. But if it comes through, that means that we can use it quickly for the reason why it's needed. It's personal. That's all I can say. Thank you so much once again. And this is the damage that has been done on our psyche. And that is why some Yoruba people think Nigeria is much better than what we are calling for. Early in his career, he led an expedition in which he violently, remember that word, violently. Violently is not something good. Violent, or what they say violently, sometimes people get killed. The reason why Nigeria is violently on you is because there's no human right, there's no reason for that, but because we are not Nigerians. So I can wear my own military uniform here, but you in Nigeria, your military uniform is no longer tolerated, but the British allow me to wear these anywhere within the country in America. What makes it different in Nigeria is because Nigeria is not a country. And we must continue to enlighten and tell you that. Nigeria is at the verge of breakup. It will break, whether it goes to 6 countries. It could break in dialogue, but I am very, very doubtful on that. If we were captured violently, Nigeria would break violently. Even if it has to go to another civil war, we are prepared for that. Now, let's come back again to John Hopkins. Now that we understand that John Hopkins is a bad man, an extremely bad guy that was using us to sell to Spanish. And today, some of you want to go to Spain, but the Spanish is telling you to get away because you are not welcome. But during the 15th century, John Hopkins was removing us without any question. So let's go further. Early in his career, he led an expedition in which he violently captured 300 Africans in Sierra Leone. Do you know what he done to them? He transported them to Spanish plantation in America. He removed 300 people. Only God knows how many people survived all the way to what we call, because remember that 15th century was a very cold time. There was no aircraft. It was a ship. And they were moving them to America, and that is why today we have a lot of Negroes, as we call them, or they call them, in America. There's a lot of Americans now that will like to go back to Sierra Leone because they find out that their root is not literally an American, but it's from Sierra Leone and what is called the Yoruba land. He moved them to what is called the Spanish plantation in America. There he traded them for pills, hide, and sugar. Imagine they were selling us for sugar. Buy 300 people, give me sugar, give me pearls, and then some other stuff as well. His mission was so lucrative. He had a lot of money inside. It was so very, very lucrative that Queen Elizabeth I of that era sponsored his subsequent journey. Imagine that the Queen, no, not Queen Elizabeth that died, his previous generation. Imagine after realizing that, wow, so there's money in this, why can't we just take as many more? And that is why today, some of you sit behind and abuse and point finger at Baba Akintoye and IGBOHO that is asking that we go out of Nigeria now so that our dignity can be coming back, our language can fall back, our lives can become better. But some of you think that it's all about the hatred that we have for Tinubu. Tinubu, like we always say, knows about all this. Does he care? I don't think so. Until we become violent. But some of you say, Koiki, don't talk about violence. I say, okay. But in 15th century, John Hawkins was using violence to remove people. Once again, my name is Olami Koiki. This is KOKIMEDIA. And as we already done the part 1 of the program, this is the part 2 side of it as well. Queen Elizabeth I decided to sponsor his subsequent journeys. She even provided more ships, supplies, and guns. They were using guns. They were not thinking of anything, and if you refuse at that time, you will be gunned down without no question. Imagine what this was happening in the 15th century. 15th century when the Yoruba people were already out there, as we know from our father, Professor Adebanji Akintoye, that told us precisely that the Yoruba people have been around before the expedition. And let me just bring that into the conversation quickly before we move further. My name is Olami Koiki. Like I said, your support is very, very needed. We have, something that I have to deal with personally myself, and I'm not asking anyone. If you can support us, please do so that we can be able to achieve our target. My name again is Olami Koiki. So let's see if I can bring what Professor Banji Akintoye, I hope we still have that because we've been moving things around. Let's see if we can still have that recording. I pray we do. If not, it will be a disaster that we've lost that, because I actually upgraded straight from, I downgraded to this iPhone that was giving me a problem. Yeah, I have it. Thank God technology is good. Let's listen to Professor Banji Akintoye.
In 1533, one Portuguese explorer trader overseas. Only a colon white, who are one of only but beyond this place, I hear that there are many big towns in the interior. And not far from here, about 10 leagues from here, there is a great city called GEBOHO, with a great wall around it. That is in 1533. As of the time John Konye, Ijebu-Ode was already more than 500 years old. Àwọn nìkan ló ń gbé ìlú cities and towns in Africa. Àwọn yòókù ló ní kálukú gbé.
That is the voice of the emeritus Professor Adebanji Akintoye. It's coming up to 16:02, which is exactly 4 p.m. local time in Nigeria, 4 p.m. here in London, and the other part of the world will be different. As we know, time zone is already different across the world. My name again is Olayomi Koiki. As a lot of you know me as KOKIMEDIA, I am one out of so many of the medias that want what we call the right to Yoruba people to be free from the bondage of Nigeria. So let's move swiftly because of our timing at exactly 1 hour, 28 minutes spent already on this live transmission. Now we know that Queen Elizabeth I decided that since the slave was going to be making a lot of money for them, she provided guns and supplies. She also even gave them sheep. She also gave him a unique coat of arms bearing a bond slaves. Let's see if we can find an image of that. She gave him a unique coat of arms bearing the slave. These are what was never told in the history of who we are. So let's see if we can find out what it looks like. So this is the coat of arms. Imagine what was given so that they can use that. So this is the coat of arms that was given to this man called John Hawkins. We'll find out a little bit about him, where he was living before he died. If it's something that I can visit, I will take you down there as I do all the time. But remind yourself that even as at the time that Queen Elizabeth I realized that there was money that can be made from slaves, she provided him with a unique coat of arms. Now, let's go further. With 3 major slavery expeditions in the 1560s, Hawkins prepared the path for the slave triangle between England, Africa, and the New World. English goods were traded in West Africa, slaves were captured, traffic on the notorious Middle Passage across the Atlantic. Traded in West Africa, slaves were captured and trafficked on a notorious Middle Passage across the Atlantic. And the cargo produced in the New World was transported back to England. His 4 voyages to Sierra Leone between 1564-1569 took a total of 1,200 Africans across the Atlantic to sell them to the Spanish settlers in the Caribbean island of Hispaniola. And this is the kind of ship they were using there, not like the new ones that they have now. So people will probably die a lot before they arrive in there. Sir, they even gave him Sir because he did a little bit of job for them. So they gave him a Sir. Sir Francis Drake and Sir John Hawkins. Sir Francis Drake, one of the 12 brothers, was raised and educated by affluent Hawkins family. In the 16th century, we are now at 21st century. Remember that Yoruba people have been existing before 16th century, according to Baba Akintoye. 500 years before 15th century, IGBOHO was a town and city. So there's nothing to come and tell us that we are not, important people during that time. 16th century England, it was quite commonplace for cousins such as Drake to be brought up by their wealthy relatives. John Hawkins was about 12 years Drake senior. His expertise and influence led to Drake joining Hawkins in his privateering activities, which is slave trade. This includes Drake's command on many campaigns against the Spanish Navy force and is later appointed as the Vice Admiral in engagement against the Spanish Armada. He also embarked with Hawkins on his voyage to Sierra Leone between 1562 and 1569. Here, they enslaved around 1,200 Africans. According to slavers' account of the time, this act would have involved, hear this, killing at least 3 times that number of the people. So during that time, they killed 3 times the number of the people. Sir John Hawkins, shipbuilder. Hawkins has spent his life around ships and learning the particulars of sea warfare. Did you hear that? The sea warfare. How many of you are preparing your mind should things go the other way around in Nigeria? Working as a shipwright, he stressed the importance of producing faster vessels with better mobility and long-range combat capability. This design directly influenced the later frigate of the 18th century. Remember now we are in 21st century. Where do you want the Yoruba people to be in 22nd century? Ask your kings, ask your baale, ask your elite. Most of them died abroad. They take their body back and everybody celebrate them. By 1587, the English Navy include 25 of these republished galleons, 18 smaller warships. These were essential in the latter battles against the Spanish Armada for his assistance in growing the Navy and supporting England's maritime power. Elizabeth I, the Queen of the period, appointed Hawkins as a rear admiral for fight against the Spanish. John Hawkins and the Spanish Armada set against the nation contest for the Navy dominances and a backdrop of a Catholic and Protestant hostility. England and Spain went from small skirmishes into non-declared warfare. this culminating in the Spanish fleet attempting to invade England in May 1588. The battle consisted of several engagements during which Rear Admiral Hawkins, remember the man named Hawkins, the one that was taking slaves from Sierra Leone, ship the victory overpowered several Spanish vessels, and the Vice Admiral Drake, his cousin, on revenge and captured Luciaro, a Spanish galleon. In recognition of his achievement, Hawkins was knighted on the deck by the Lord High Admiral as Sir Charles Forward. How did John Hawkins die? In 1593, Hawkins' son Richard was captured by the Spanish in the South Atlantic. In response, Hawkins and Drake raised a fleet of 27 ships and set sail from Plymouth on 29 August 1595. These were warriors. They were never ready. They were never, interested whether they die along the line, but they knew that the world will remember them, whether for good or bad, like I'm reading their own history today. Which history are you going to put out there? Which history are you going to allow people to talk about you? Time will tell for every single one of us. Neither admiral will see their own land again. The rescue attempt was hampered by disagreement, storms, and by the Spanish, who had increased their presence in the area. Hawkins died on the 12th of November in San Juan off the coast of Pretoria, Puerto Rico. Drake sailed across the Spanish mainland towards Panama in an attempt to escape. However, in January 1596, off the coast of Portobello in Panama, Dynasty swept through the fleet, killing him on the 26th. Drake's body, like that of Hawkins before him, was interred at the sea. Now we understand that, so we go back one step into what we were discussing earlier. And as I always say, you can tell that Guardian is telling me, I have read some of the article, why not support as well? Like I said, we need your support this particular time. Keep that support coming so that we can be able to achieve our target. Let's go further. Now that we have a understanding of what happened 450 years after Elizabeth I she sponsored the John Hawkins slave expedition to West Africa. I've given you a bit of background to that. If you've never heard of that before, maybe you're a Yoruba man, Yoruba woman, whether you're a Nigerian, you don't even know what has happened 450 years ago. We were taken out of our territory as a slave to sugarcane area. This is Koikimedia Live, bringing the world closer to your doorstep. Roland Williams, okay, let's go further. So, Elizabeth II was attending a service in Westminster Abbey where the King Charles was coronated recently, as well as we saw. But something happened on that particular day known as March 27, 2007. The young man you're seeing here is called Toyin Agbatu. Toyin Agbatu decided to call the Queen Elizabeth out for not doing enough. You can see him there. I don't know where he is at the moment, but we know that Toyin Agbatu, has been one person that confronted, Queen Elizabeth II in London. Let's see if we can find any video of him. And I think this is the event that led to what is now a discussion. Let's watch this video.
The congregation watched as, still standing a few yards from the Queen, the protester Toyin Agbatu demanded that Britain issue a formal apology for its part in the slave trade.
How many of us will be bold enough today? How many of us are holding our boldness and not understanding that we have something inside us, and if we do not allow that something to come out, we will die taking it away to wherever we live after we die. We must remember, even though Toyin Agbatu challenged Queen Elizabeth II, I am not sure whether Toyin Agbatu, I believe he's still around, but Queen Elizabeth II is gone. But Toyin Agbatu will be remembered for confronting a Queen of England right inside the Abbey, challenging her for what happened during the slave trade in what is known as Nigeria and the other part of Africa.
The service came to a halt.
The service actually came to an halt when Toyin Agbatu decided to challenge Queen Elizabeth II for crime against humanity on the slave trade that a generation, which is Queen Elizabeth I, sponsored, which I read earlier, John Hawkins.
Watched as, still standing a few yards.
And that is him there. few yards according to what we know. Yes, security quickly surrounded him, but his message was really, really out there. He was able to disrupt that ceremony. How many of you will take the same bold step, or you are just sitting there and expecting some of us to take the lead when you can also do whatever it takes to highlight why we are asking for right to self-determination?
From the Queen, the protester Toyin Agbeto demanded that Britain issue a formal apology.
It was very clear. He was demanding that Britain issue an apology for the slave trade that Queen Elizabeth I decided that he was making money and it provided guns and ships to John Hawkins to kill as many Africans and as many Yoruba people.
Its part in the slave trade.
The word sorry is still hard to say. They still don't want to say sorry because do you know why? If they had to say sorry, something will lead to something. Let's finish watching this and I'll play the next video quickly. The other, he said Queen was a disgrace for using, you can see all those Oyibo people, you can see the way they were looking at, in this place, until we do something, and that's if you want to support us, that is the way you can support us through the PayPal, Cash App, like I said, your urgent needed, as we are asking, is voluntary, it's just for my own need, for something that is very, very urgent, I need to deal with as quickly as possible.
Directly at the Prime Minister sitting in the choir stall.
That is Tony Blair. Tony Blair was just looking. They can't do anything. Everybody knows that slave trade occurred, and the England monarch paid the price for the reason why some of us will never know our great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. G7, as we say, economy, security, remember the indigenous people.
Before he finally withdrew.
Let's watch it one more time.
To a halt. The congregation watched as, still standing a few yards from the Queen, the protester Toyin Agbeto demanded that Britain issue a formal apology for its part in the slave trade.
We're sorry. You're a disgrace.
Mr. Agbeto shouted directly at the Prime Minister sitting in the choir stalls before he finally withdrew.
How many of us have boldness? How many of the Yoruba people can do that? How many of you can push like Toyin Agbeto? It was not violent, but he was there actively saying it the way it's meant to say, without anything that a lot of us will never know. I want to see if I can get something out of him again. Yeah, let's see what this is. I don't know what it is. Okay, I think it's like a music. Toyin Agbeto present Nemesis, the Transgressive Storms EP. Well, we pray for the brother. He's a Yoruba man, I can tell with the name. But how many of you will be bold enough? Or you are just all waiting, you know, while some of you sit behind the fence, and then it's so easy to criticize Sunday IGBOHO because some of you do not have the balls. IGBOHO had the balls to face the consequence, and we pray that the Lord Eledumare put him to defeat all his enemies, internally and externally. Some of you will never be bold enough like IGBOHO, and IGBOHO name will be remembered as one of our own for the rest of our life. We appreciate him, just as we cannot say more than billions of thank you for confronting the Fulani government, standing firm, telling them that we, the Yoruba people, must exit this contraction. You can see what IGBOHO has done. It's almost similar to what Toyin Agbeto was doing to the Queen Elizabeth II here in UK. That tells you that we, the Yoruba people, nothing can do us if we all stand firm. But some of you, any little thing, and that is why some of you will die before we get to the final destination. Because you want to compromise this journey, you will die during the process. Because this journey is not a mankind. This is a spiritual journey. And Toyin was there in 2007, talking directly, just few meters to Queen Elizabeth II, that you should apologize for what your own monarch did. But some of you today are too scared. You don't want violence. But John Hawkins was violent against us all the time during that period in the 15th century. But today, nobody wants violence. If we do not want violence, the G7 must prepare for a conversation with every indigenous people. If otherwise, the violence that we don't want will eventually happen at the appropriate time. Let's read further quickly before we start winding down from here. My name is OLAMILEKAN. I hope your Saturday afternoon is going very well wherever you are. Like I said, the presentation is in full English because I am communicating this particular program to the G7 so that it can be on record today that I did such as well. During the Westminster Abbey to commemorate the bicentenary of Britain's abolition of the slave trade, Rowan Williams, the Archbishop of the Canterbury, was delivering a sermon focused on the slavery idyllious persistent legacy. We who are the heirs of the slave-owning and the slave-trading nations of the past have to face the fact that our historical prosperity was built in a large part of this atrocity, he said. This UK that you are watching me communicating from was built on the slave trade, and today I am here telling you now that Nigeria is not working, but some of you are still pointing fingers, say we should not worry, Nigeria is going to work. I pray it works in your lifetime. Moments later, a black protester dashed in front of the altar, disrupting the service with a shout of, "This is an insult to us." Her face impassive, Queen Elizabeth watched as security guards struggle with the protester known as Toyin Agbetu. He is the founder of the Pan-African Human Rights Organization, Legally. As he was possibly ejected, Agbetu pointed at the Queen and yelled, "You, the Queen, should be ashamed. You should have said sorry." Well, my name is OLAMILEKAN. As I almost wind down, let me just move us swiftly to what is happening again in America, where another person is demanding that we should also ask for the situation in those activities. Let's see if we can get that out as well. Once again, bear with us. I need to look for that video quickly. Yeah, videos. And then this will be the video. Let's watch this as well.
All this nonsense, homelessness, and all this other garbage y'all talk about, police violence and all this stuff, don't nobody care about that. Don't nobody real care about that. We care about our reparations. And we have to put white people on notice that we want our reparations. That our foreparents and us, we didn't work for free and underpaid and all this nonsense. And the white folks get away with it. And they talk about the great city they're building. No, we want our reparations. $3 million per person. $3 million per person right here in this city. That's the only thing black people got to care about. All this other little nonsense y'all talk about, we do not care about.
This happened somewhere in Tampa City Council, I believe in New York, or no, America, not too sure, what part of the United States. This happened on the 18th, as you got the date there. The time was 10:28 a.m. local time there. It happened just 2 days ago. It shows that the world is now awakened. The more we continue with the, with the constructive dialogue, telling the world our plight, I'm sure we will get to where we are going very, very soon. Let's watch this one more time. Like I said, I do not own the copyright to this.
All this nonsense, homelessness, and all this other garbage y'all talk about, police violence and all this stuff, don't nobody care about that. Don't nobody real care about that. We care about our reparations. And we have to put white people on notice that we want our reparations. That our foreparents and us, we didn't work for free and underpaid and all this nonsense. And the white folks get away with it. And they talk about the great city they're building. No, we want our reparations. $3 million per person. $3 million per person right here in this city. That's the only thing black people got to care about. All this other little nonsense y'all talk about, we do not care about.
Well, you do not care about all the nonsense that they're discussing. We've given you the background to John Hawkins, outside the Westminster Abbey, Agbetu told the press that an apology from the British monarch was already long overdue. The Queen has to say sorry. She never said sorry till she died, and we hope the King will say sorry. It was Elizabeth I. She commended John Hawkins to take his ship. He said, the monarch and the government and the church are all in their patting themselves on the back. At the time, commentators overwhelmingly dismissed Agbetu as a madman, despite previous appeal for redress for the historical injustice of slavery. But a formal launch of the CARICON Reparation Commission in 2014, the Black Lives Matter protest that swept in the UK in 2020, and the mounting call from across the Caribbean to cut ties to the crown and push for reparations in the wake of the Queen's death, of stark evidence that Agbetu's lone voice in Westminster was of many. So the more that we are shouting, people think that nobody's interested in what we are saying, but it's just that it might be like a lone wolf voice, but very soon, as many of you would have no other option than to once again, a very good afternoon and welcome to the program as we continue to tell you all about the G7 and likewise what is happening as well with the monarch. We are just about a few more minutes before the end of the program. So it is not Agbetu alone. I mean, imagine he was talking in 2007, but today now we have as many indigenous people that are now questioning, the British role or the British monarch during the period of the slave trade and the indigenous people as well. As I'm going to be winding down, we pray that the G7 will listen to our cry so that things can be resolved amicably without any violence. We do not want to go through the route of John Hawkins that was very violent on our people. So this can be done violently by having a conversation with our leaders and those within the Yoruba Nation movement. It is the day 2 of the G7. We will continue to monitor what is happening there in Japan, and then we'll be bringing that up later on, maybe for tomorrow during the Sunday broadcast. So make sure you stay tuned with us. Time right now in Japan is extremely late because the time zone is different from here. It is exactly 26 minutes past midnight. They are already on Sunday. So in the next few more hours, when we come back tomorrow, I'll be looking at what is going on within the G7, and I'll be bringing it up to date for the benefit of all our viewers and listeners from different platforms as well. Have a very blessed day. Once again, Yoruba Nation has come to stay. Yoruba Nation is non-negotiable. Yoruba Nation has nothing to do with the current politics played in Nigeria called Gbegiri and Amala politics. The Yoruba people and the indigenous people, they were forcefully put together by the British monarch in 1914 for their own selfish gain, but we can still come together and tell them that things can be done in a very, very civilized society, because I am sure that all these individuals, all these G7 nations and the West and the European Union would never want terrorists to attack their loved ones, would never want the economy, security to affect them. Why then are we different? Yoruba people, wake up. Your elite might not tell you this. Your media at home might not tell you this. Your kings might not tell you this. But one thing is, we that we are fighting for the right to self-determination are the only ones that can tell you the truth and nothing but the truth. The Yoruba people have suffered inside Nigeria, and it is time that we leave Nigeria now before it is too late. Nigeria is at the verge of breakup. Breaking up now is nothing to be scared of. We can break up and still be, union in terms of, neighbor as a neighbor. But we don't think living together with Nigeria is no longer, working. Nigeria must come down, whether through a referendum, whether through a peaceful negotiation where we can negotiate our way out, whether through whatever it is. But one thing is, the Nigeria you know 63 years ago will never exist in another 63 years from now. As I leave you again in the hands of Eledumare, thank you so much. Like I said, the presentation was in English because of the audience I wanted to target outside the vicinity of the Yoruba community, because there's a lot of media running into Japan and they're still going, even though we don't have the source, the money to have traveled down to Japan. It would have been nice to travel to Japan. I would have been able to engage as many other journalists that are on ground there, and maybe we can, push what we are doing. But like I said, if we don't have the kind of, funding to do such, that would literally mean that, events like these will just come and go while we are here all the time, trying our best to tell the world about Yoruba Nation. I believe those that are in Japan, if we are not there, they should have think about the G7 and represent us there. But like I said, we're all different in the way we think. And I hope you are already thinking of the next big event that the Yoruba people can participate as well. When I mean participate, real engagement with the people, with the journalists, with the countries that are representing those events, because an event like G7 is a huge event that we should not have missed. But again, it is what it is. We are only doing our own little best from the little resources that we have under our pocket. And if you want to support, like I said, the details to support can be found on www.koikimedia.com, or you can reach out to us and we will tell you how you can support and fund the platform, especially at this very important time that we are coming out, probably, like I said, in the next 48 hours or 72 hours, and do a proper program on that. But for now, I'll leave you in the hands of Eledumare. But let's play this before we go. Let's remind ourselves that our engagement with international community relationship is very, very important. You can do it as individual, you can do it as group of people. Some of you have different WhatsApp group. Have you thought about putting a letter together under your own group? Nothing to even do with the big brand of the Yoruba self-determination movement, which is called the YSDF. We can think about you as your own individual group by putting the pen, putting the message, send it to the Nigerian representative countries in the country called Nigeria today, or if you're outside the country, there's a lot of embassy. They will receive your letter, and I'm sure one day you might be surprised that you might be the key to the movement. Rather than waiting for some of us, you can also be the key. This is how far we can go this afternoon. Have a very great Saturday afternoon. We will not be back again today. It's going to be a free day later on. But like I said, if there's only an emergency or breaking news, the rest assured that the Koikimedia team are working around the clock to bring you the news and the airline. Follow us on the social media handles where we operate, especially on Twitter, where we need as many of engagement. A lot of the Yoruba people are not on Twitter. It's a very, very sad situation. We should be under the table of the G7 countries, telling them the reason why we want to go. It's easy for us to sit on the social media like this and comment, but the real struggle is right inside the Twitter space.